Judy Solis here, and welcome to another episode of Judy's EcoVentures. And today we have a special guest, Joey Salamini, who is a vet nurse and travels around the world for conservation efforts. Hi Joey, how are you today? Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. Now I want to get started and just talk about how you decided to get into this field, your love for reptiles. I know you have a distinct love for reptiles.
Yes, I do.
And exotic animals.
So I've been obsessed with animals since as young as I can remember. Since I always say since I was old enough to formulate an independent thought,
Yeah.
I loved animals. And you know, that's all I spent my time doing. Even as a kid, I didn't really care for dolls or, you know, playing with other things. I was always outside catching frogs, feeding stray cats.
Yeah.
And then I just carried that with me throughout my life.
Tell us a little bit more about your inspiration.
As much as, you know, we think about Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin and people like that, there's really not that many people bringing a big spotlight to wildlife conservation. But yeah, I grew up watching Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, and
That's your love.
I just love him. I loved everything that he did, and I just knew that I was going to be in the Amazon one day, you know, watching him out there.
What specifically did you decide to study?
So I started off as pre-veterinary medicine.
Okay.
And then I did some animal science, and then I kind of focused it a little bit more into wildlife conservation and research. After traveling a few times, I decided I wanted to do more of the research. I wanted to be more involved in the conservation part of it. And I actually am still a student, so I'm still studying right now.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Now I know from your background you're half Italian, half Puerto Rican. Do you see many, if any at all, Latinos in this field?
Latinos in this field? No, I don't think so.
I have a special compassion for animals. I always have growing up, but in my culture, it's not necessarily a thing.
My parents were very supportive of my passion for animals. They really were. So, and they had to deal with me bringing in a lot of things.
Yeah.
However, I had aunts, uncles, and particularly my grandparents that were so not okay with my thing with snakes. Really not okay. That they thought I was super weird. And yeah, they thought something was wrong with me. They're like, why doesn't she play like a regular child? Why does she want to go out and catch snakes? So.
Now that's interesting you say that, because that makes me feel like maybe that's a part of why you are so for or advocate for those underdogs, reptiles.
Definitely. From the misconceptions about them is it's terrible, and I never felt any of that I guess some other people have when they see spiders, tarantulas, snakes, rats, that disdain, I guess, that they feel, that fear. I've never felt any of that. And my passion, one of my passions, is to get people to the point where they kind of feel, because I know I can't totally bring them here, but to where they kind of feel how I feel towards these animals.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I do want to get into your travels because it's super fascinating to me. You've gone to Latin America. I've been to Colombia and I've done so much great work there. So I know how fulfilling that could be. Yes. Tell me about why you decided to travel to Latin America.
So my first time deciding to travel to Latin America was actually to Costa Rica in 2016. I went to a wildlife rescue center off the Pacific coast. Okay. It's like near a little town called Dominical. And so that was my first experience with it. And I did some work there, and it kind of just opened this whole new world for me.
Yeah.
Like it took off from there for me. And I just kept going back. I started to do research and found that there's so many wildlife sanctuaries all throughout Latin America, Central America, South America, and they work to preserve the rainforest and, more importantly, rescue and rehabilitate wildlife victims of trafficking.
Talk to me a little bit about wildlife trafficking. Is that mostly the cases you see when you're in Latin America?
About 90% of the cases that I work with are animals, mainly monkeys, dozens of species of monkeys, manatees, jaguars, ocelots, parrots, things like that have been stolen from the wild. Usually they're babies that are stolen from their mothers, and their mothers are killed. And then they're either sold as pets, they're sold as bushmeat, or they're sold to tourist companies that use them to attract tourists to take selfies with.
Wow. How do you distinguish what's a good place to volunteer at?
Well, in Latin America, most sanctuaries are ethical.
Okay.
I've done so much research. I know of so many. So I've been to a handful, but there's like dozens that I still want to go to, and I can pretty much confidently tell you that most of them are ethical.
That's awesome.
So I basically just choose where I'm going to go to next based on what place I feel like needs a person like me the most at the time, and also a place where I can gain more information for my own personal research.
What is it that we should avoid as a public or a society? What is it that we're avoiding here?
Well, so first of all, when you speak about tigers and cheetahs and things like that, those animals, you're coming to those types of sanctuaries in other continents, other countries, Africa, Thailand, India, things like that. So those, when you're going to those countries, those are the places that you want to be aware of, things like that. As far as Latin America, there's not too much of that, but you do want to be conscious of the jaguar situation. Okay. So there is one of those in Belize that you want to avoid, and you do want to be aware of anything that allows you to interact with sloths, because humans really shouldn't be holding or really interacting too much with sloths.
What type of animals were you working with in the Amazon?
So this time I was working primarily with monkeys, which is my focus now. I do mainly work with monkeys every time I go to a sanctuary. This place had several different species, so I was working with howler monkeys, woolly monkeys, dusky titi monkeys, tamarine monkeys.
What are all these differences? Wait, so there's like
there's a lot.
Yes, difference in what in traits and habits and
everything.
Food and
their appearance, their behavior, their diet, where they live, how they behave, how they communicate.
God, that's so fascinating.
So my research is more geared towards how to prepare them for a successful release back into the wild. That's what I'm particularly passionate about, because it's such a complicated thing to try and tackle for certain sanctuaries, or for most sanctuaries, or anyone who's rehabilitating primates. It's complicated, and so most of my research is how best to do that, so that they can be released and they can be successful and they can, reproduce. And the whole point is to just keep the species of these monkeys in general going and healthy in the wild.
Tell me, what was it that you learned from that experience with their behavior that was just fascinating, or that was different, that you haven't learned before?
I was able to figure out who was the dominant, how hierarchy worked amongst them. I was able to figure out what, like I said, what their sounds mean to each other. And I was able to start getting 2 little orphan babies used to being around the adults, and just kind of learning how the adults choose who's gonna take in the baby. And
oh my God, that's so cool.
A lot of little intricacies that were really fascinating that I didn't know before.
There is a picture that caught my eye, and I guess it was because of the caption that you chose for that picture. It was you bottle feeding a monkey, and you said in the picture, you try not to smile in those pictures so people can understand how serious of a matter it is. Because I'm guilty of seeing this and seeing, these surrogate mothers bottle feeding, and I'm like, oh my God, I want to do that. That's so cool, without realizing that you really don't want to do that. Yeah,
that's the worst situation that a baby monkey could be in. Absolutely worse, because we just cannot provide what its natural mother could.
When you see a monkey that's psychologically just broken, how are those situations handled?
Similarly, it's handled based on the sanctuary and based on the type of assistance they have and how they decide to address the situation. Some monkeys are so psychologically damaged that they can't be with other monkeys, which is really unfortunate, because primates are very social.
What are some of the most challenging cases you've experienced?
I think, so one of the most challenging situations I experienced was actually with a sloth. So even though I do my main focus with monkeys, I do work with sloths and other species as well. And we actually watched the sloth die in the clinic at the sanctuary, and we really couldn't figure out what happened, but she had just spent so much time at the sanctuary and so much time having close contact with people around her, and this was a little bit of a questionable situation. And she did pass away from like extreme stress and stuff, which is why it's so important to release animals, especially sloths. So that was tough to see.
What is your ultimate goal?
So My ultimate goal with my research is to help wildlife sanctuaries in Latin America, so both in Central and South America, rehabilitate species, specifically primates, because I have a focus on primates, rehabilitate them so that they can be successful in the wild.
Now, how's your life in the Amazon? Like, we're talking about the animals, but how do you eat? How do you sleep? Where do you, like, electricity? Like, how do you survive in the Amazon?
So it varies. It's different with every place, and so I try to pack and prepare appropriately. Most places have some form of electricity, but I've been to a few that don't have any electricity.
Okay. You work with domestic animals here in the States. How is that transition for you? So you're one day working with monkeys and then you come back. Does it make it almost easier?
It does. Working with monkeys and working with them in a veterinary sense, which I have. I work in the clinics as well in these sanctuaries. It makes working with crazy cats and dogs easier because it's like, this
I
is
can
nothing
deal with
compared
anything,
to a crazy monkey who has bizarre strength. It definitely gives me like a well-rounded knowledge on everything, and I'm able to bring what I know about working in the States in a veterinary hospital in the States. I'm able to bring that there, and some tips and tricks I learn out there, I'm able to bring back to States.
Definitely. Like, can I go to the Amazon and volunteer?
Yes.
What would I do there?
So again, it all varies on the sanctuary. It varies on what they need and on how much time you're going to spend there.
Okay.
So you could basically, it depends how they function. So you could definitely help clean up the cages. You can help feed the babies if you're comfortable with that.
Now, if there's anything you want viewers to know, any way they can help, if we can help.
First of all, it's definitely be conscious of the content that you share and participate in online. There's a lot of videos and images going around of people interacting with animals that they shouldn't be. And that interaction, even if it is harmless, what it does is it helps fuel the industry of wildlife trafficking, because if you look at images, and this is a challenge, go online and look at images on Instagram with people who have like posts that have a lot of followers. Look at the comments. You will definitely see people saying, oh, I want to do that. I'm gonna buy a monkey.
For sure.
I'm gonna do that, and then you're just contributing to that whole business. And when you travel, try to avoid tourist companies and tourist excursions that allow you to interact with wildlife and take photos, especially with certain monkeys and especially with sloths.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joey, for being with us today and for sharing your journey. Please let the audience know where we can find you. Let them know how they can find out more about you.
Of course. You can follow me on Instagram at Joey of the Jungle. And then in the future, hopefully soon, you can follow my research on my website that I'm currently building. It's going to be junglerescuereform.org.
And of course, if you want to follow more of Judys EcoVentures, be sure to tune in on Judy Soul TV. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on our Instagram. Same handle, Judy Soul TV, where we speak to more people like Joey.
He's like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's me. He's like, cheese.